The Holy Gospel today comes from the 25th chapter of the book of Matthew. Jesus said, "At that time the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight the cry rang out, 'Here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him.' Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out.' 'Oh no,' they replied, 'there may not be enough for both of us and you. Go to those who are selling oil and buy some for yourselves.' But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the others also came. 'Lord, Lord,' they said, 'open the door for us.' But he replied, 'Truly I tell you, I do not know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour.'" Word of God, word of life. Thanks be to God. You know, I almost quit playing football. It was during my junior year of high school. We had entered the season state ranked, and the experts expected us to go far in the playoffs. But tragedy struck our team. Our star running back tore his ACL during a scrimmage, and if my memory serves me right, we lost 3 or 4 other starters due to knee injuries that year. We had some talent, but we weren't deep. And losing that many kids turned us from a pretty good team into just a good team. We lost several games that we normally would have won. And after one of those losses, several of my teammates went to a party and had a few beers. And that was strictly verboten. You see, my high school coach wasn't stupid. He knew that in a small rural Texas town, kids partied on the weekend, even though it was not legal. He had forbidden anyone on the team from drinking, not only because it was wrong, but because it had an effect on the way you played. It slowed you down and zapped your stamina. There was to be no drinking of alcohol at all. And Coach found out about my teammates. And what transpired Monday during our athletic period then could only be described as hell. Coach Garza put us through one of the worst 30-minute workouts I had ever been a part of. And the entire time he kept yelling, "Was it worth it? How does it feel now? Was it worth it?" Several players became sick, and I frankly was pushed to my physical limits. And after athletics and for the rest of the school day, I stewed on this, and the more I stewed on it, the angrier I became. I hadn't gone out drinking. Why was Coach taking it out on the whole team? I was frustrated beyond belief, and I did not feel like this was right or fair, and I was not going to stand for it. I decided to quit. So after school and before the afternoon practice, I walked into Coach's office. I told him I didn't drink. I'm not going to put up with this. I quit. And for the first time, I saw my coach drop his guard. He looked at me and he said, "Kevin, please don't. Just trust me. There's a reason that I did what I did, and I'll let you all know." And at that moment, I could have walked away. I could have said, "Forget it." But I didn't. I trusted my coach. I trusted that he had a bigger picture in mind. What it was, I had no clue. But I went back to the locker room and I dressed out. We all hit the field. We did our stretching and got ready for the practice, but Coach Garza pulled us all aside at that moment. He had us all kneel around him and he talked to us. And he said, "Men, drinking isn't the only way to cope with losing, because that only leads to more pain." And we were like, "Yeah, it sure did. We remember practice this morning." But he continued, "Men, to deal with the pain of loss, work to get better. Work to overcome the things that brought us down. Focus, be determined. You might still have pain, but it's a lot healthier this way for you. Now strap it up and let's get better. And you may disagree with Coach Gaddis's methods, but they worked. We gelled as a team and we made the playoffs despite our rash of injuries. We didn't go nearly as far as we were predicted, but working through the adversity that we faced actually made us better people. To my knowledge, not a single football player touched a drop of alcohol during the rest of that season. Wasn't fun to go through, but because of Coach's actions, the command became encouragement. And that made a huge difference in how we acted. Now, what in the world does that have to do with 10 bridesmaids, 5 of which are wise and 5 of which are foolish? What does it have to do with the future coming of the bridegroom, who in our gospel lesson today is obviously Jesus, when he comes to bring God's kingdom in its fullness? Well, stay awake and you might just find out. 10 bridesmaids, Jesus tells us, took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. Now that's an interesting tidbit of information that Jesus gives to us, and it leads us to ask the question, what makes a bridesmaid wise and what makes a bridesmaid foolish? And at first glance, we might think that it depends on whether or not that bridesmaid brought extra oil to fill their lamps. Because that's what Jesus gives as the next detail. 5 wise ones brought extra oil, 5 foolish ones did not. But what if bringing oil is not what makes the bridesmaid wise or foolish? What if it's something else? And I'd like to make a case that it is something else. Because Jesus has already told us earlier in the book of Matthew what makes someone wise and what makes someone foolish. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't make this connection or figure it out until Monday of this week. So this is, if it's new to you, it's new to me, okay? But when I did, it totally changed the way I look at this parable. So what did Jesus tell us earlier in the book of Matthew? Well, in the Sermon on the Mount, almost at the very end, Jesus gives us this little nugget. He says, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat against the house and it fell, and great was its fall." The same Greek words for foolish and wise are at play at both in these teachings. So to be wise means to hear the words of Jesus and act on them. To be foolish is to hear the words of Jesus and not act on them. The kingdom of heaven will be like 10 bridesmaids, 5 who had heard the words of Jesus and acted on them, 5 who had heard the words of Jesus and not acted on them. That's what makes them wise. That's what makes them foolish. And then Jesus says, the 5 wise ones brought extra oil for their lamps. The 5 foolish did not. So why is that an important detail? Well, we need to kind of study the ancient culture to figure that out. And the first thing we have to be honest with is when we look at the ancient cultures like that, we don't know a lot about the weddings and how they were conducted. We would have to do a lot of guessing, and we could be very right and very wrong. So we're not going to go down that road because we could be led astray. However, we do know a bit about how they handled time in the ancient Jewish world, and that was nothing like we handle time today. As I mean, face it, we're governed by the clock. We make appointments. We're expected to be there at a certain time. I mean, yesterday I did a wedding, and the wedding coordinator gave me a 2-page itinerary which laid out the timeline minute by minute, hour by hour. We were expected to be at a certain time, at a certain place, and if we were late, then the consequences would be detrimental. But you see, that's not how they dealt with time in the ancient world. They didn't wear watches and set appointments. They took as much time as necessary to handle their business or deal with acquaintances. They sure didn't set alarms on their cell phones. It was a very, very different pace of life. And by our standards, it would be very, very frustrating because you could never really be sure when someone would or wouldn't show up. And you had to account for that. And Jesus tells us in this parable, sure enough, the bridegroom is delayed. We don't know why. We just know that he didn't arrive in his expected window of time. And it became late, complicating the matter. Everyone was tired. And both the wise and the foolish went to sleep. This indicates there is nothing wrong with sleeping, unless it's during a sermon. There's nothing wrong with resting. The body needs time to recuperate. The body needs downtime so that one can be at one's best, especially when one has a job to do. And that's an important point that we have to consider now. What is the job of these bridesmaids? What are they supposed to do? Well, the scholars that I consulted said that the bridesmaids are supposed to shine their lights on behalf of the groom. They are to put on a display or a dance which turns everyone's attention towards him as he comes to get his bride. In other words, they are to shine their lights to give glory to the bridegroom. At this point, I want to go back to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount just for a second, because I want to read to you another one of Jesus' teachings that he spoke there. Listen. He said, "You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." Do you see the connection? I hope you do, because we need to go back to the parable to flesh it out. Sometime in the middle of the night, a call goes up. The bridegroom is approaching. The bridesmaids rouse themselves from sleep. They prepare their lamps, which means they trim the wick so that they would burn brighter. And that's when a problem presents itself. The lamps of the foolish bridesmaids start going out. So they turn to the wise bridesmaids and they say, "Give us some of your oil because our lamps are going out." And the wise respond, "Oh, no, but heck no." Seriously, that's how strong it is in the Greek at that particular point. It's an emphatic no way, because we might not have enough if we share with you. And that raises a little bit of a sticky question, because, why not share? Are the wise bridesmaids being selfish here? Surely they could spare oil for the other 5, because isn't that what a follower of Jesus would do? And the answer to that is yes, if this were about oil. But this isn't about the oil. Because remember that. Remember, first off, this is about the bridegroom, and it's about your responsibility towards the bridegroom and fulfilling your job. It's your job to shine light on him. It's your job to illuminate him. You are responsible for that. And again, if we incorporate Jesus' teaching from the Sermon on the Mount, we can't help someone else shine their light. You cannot produce good works for someone else. They have to do that on their own. They have to be responsible for their own production of good works to glorify the Father who is in heaven. So that's why the wise bridesmaids say no. They say, "Go, wake up the oil merchants. Go get your own oil. Go do your own works." So the foolish ones leave to go get oil, and by the time they return, the bridegroom has appeared. All have entered into the wedding banquet, and the 5 foolish bridesmaids are left on the outside looking in. So they knock to request entrance, because they want to be at the wedding feast. They want to be in the presence of the bridegroom. They even ask for him to come and admit them. And they say, "Lord, Lord," that's important to remember, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But the bridegroom tells them, "I never knew you." And that response is actually quite a mystery. Would the bridegroom have asked complete strangers to be at his wedding? Hardly. But again, let's go back to the Sermon on the Mount to get some explanation here. Let's remember one more of Jesus' teachings there. This one. Jesus says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. On that day many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many deeds of power in your name?' But I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Go away from me, you evildoers.'" The foolish bridesmaids, the ones who heard Jesus' words and failed to act on them, are left outside in the darkness. And the wise ones who heard Jesus' words and acted on them are in the inside, in the presence of the bridegroom, celebrating the marriage feast. So keep watch. Stay awake. You do not know the time or the hour. So, what's the application of this parable? What does it all boil down to? Well, let's be first clear on what the gospel tells us. Because first and foremost, the gospel tells us that we all start off foolish, all right? It tells us first and foremost that we are all inclined to hear Jesus' words and ignore them. We don't want to follow him because we want to follow ourselves. We want to serve ourselves and our own self-interest. But it is only when our hearts are changed that we hear Jesus' words and then act on them. It is only when we experience the love and mercy of God that is poured out on the cross of Calvary that we change our perspective. When we understand that Jesus died for our sins and we place our trust in his actions and not our own, then we become wise. Then we seek to honor Jesus. Then we seek to glorify Jesus. We intentionally think about how our words and our deeds will bring praise and worship to him. We no longer just think for the moment and for our own self-gratification. Instead, we start thinking about the consequences of our actions. We think about the future possibilities and we plan on how we can welcome the bridegroom, the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. We contemplate about how we can readily shine our light to bring him glory. And when that happens, the command, "Let your light so shine," changes. It's no longer a command, but it becomes encouragement. It's the difference between, "Let your light shine, doggone it." Sorry. I made Cheryl jump up here. My apologies. I think I didn't mean Millie to. I'm sorry. But I had to make the distinction. It's the difference between that and telling someone, go ahead. Let your light shine. You can do it. You see how differently that comes across? You see how the motivation is different? And I just think that's tremendously important because I know what it's like, and I especially know what it's like this time of year. There's always another person or charity coming up to us now and saying, "Give to us, give to this, give to that." It seems like a never-ending chain of requests, and it's easy to get overwhelmed and want to quit. Especially if you feel like you're being told what to do or feel like you're being guilted into giving or helping out. It's easy to get burned out and frustrated, and a burned out lamp really can't spread much light, can it? So today, please hear this teaching as encouragement. Hear it as those who are wise and who have built their lives on Jesus and his teaching. Hear it as those who know the grace and love and mercy of God. Because I know that grace has found you. I do. Because I know many of the things that you as the people of God, not only as this congregation that is called Bethany Lutheran Church, but also as individuals in this community. I know what you do. I get to see it. Many of you are striving to make this community a better place. You are helping out in various organizations to make a difference. You are working in the lives of individual people to show compassion and caring. And I know a lot of it is privately done. You don't want any attention for it. I get it. But remember, no one lights a lamp and puts it under a bushel basket. Shine. And I'm not going to point out any fingers and name names, okay? But instead, I will simply say, thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your caring and for your compassion. Thank you for responding to the grace of God by being gracious in return. But I don't just want to thank you, I also want to continue to encourage you. So go. Go ahead. Let your light shine. Keep giving glory to your Father who is in heaven. And when the bridegroom returns, just keep shining, because your life is built on the rock of Jesus Christ. Thanks be to God. Amen.